Hello and welcome to this month's edition of My Cyber Why. This is the show where we talk to the people who are helping keep us safe in cyberspace about what drives them, why they do it, and to better understand the people that are doing the hard work of protecting us. Today we've got a great guest. Her name is Debbie Taylor Moore. She's an independent consultant, but that doesn't really explain all that you do. Debbie is an entrepreneur, a founder, and is right now the co-founder, is that right, of Cyber Energy Partners?
Energy Cyber Partners.
Energy Cyber Partners. Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks so much for being here, Debbie.
It's great to be here. Diana, it's always great to talk to you. So I appreciate this opportunity to chat a little bit.
Our pleasure, absolutely. So who is Debbie Taylor Moore?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I'm a 17-year cyber veteran. But if you were to ask me about sort of the people side of me, I am a little bit of a humanitarian, a bit of a hobbyist. I like to collect hats, and I love hats and teas and tablescapes, and I do that sort of a thing here in Virginia. And I have a husband and two adult sons who are actually more or less in the arts, one of whom I'm sort of a momager for. He is a model with Wilhelmina. And so he does national campaigns for big sports and leisure brands like The Gap and Sports Authority, Dick's Sporting Goods, NFL, NBA. And so that's fun. And it's a little busy, but I do that in addition to cyber.
Wow. So like sort of the next stop, keeping up with the Moores or something, like the keeping up with the Kardashians is the momager.
I think we'd be awful as a reality TV family because we all work so hard. We're all running around trying to get a million things done. But I love this field, and I've been at this, like I said, for 17 years. And I actually started back in 2003. I worked for Microsoft. And I started as back then I worked in software sales and professional services, deploying large deployments of all kinds of enabling type software right at the turn of the century. I had worked for IBM for years and then went to go work for Microsoft. And during that time period was when I experienced the first really huge sort of catastrophic worm. You'll remember SQL Slammer, which happened back in like January 2003 timeframe. And I actually had clients who were down for days. I had one client who was down for 9 days, and they were so angry that you really couldn't talk to them about anything. And back then, no one knew exactly what to say about security. And I thought to myself, these deployments, the software, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, and I don't think we really have a solution. We don't really have anybody who's sitting in the incident response pocket on any of this. And, back then, Microsoft was working hard toward the Trusted Computing Initiative. And that was sort of a secure coding initiative that sort of spoke to the building in of security versus, what do you do if something catastrophic happens? And so the whole industry was in the same place on this. And I thought there's got to be, this is creating a new industry. So I actually went out and I started looking to sort of understand who could be out here working purely in security. And there were these two NSA guys who were sort of one of the first security operations center organizations. And they were working a bit with Intel, and they were working with commercial customers as well. But they were very altruistic in the way that they approached it because they just really wanted to solve the problem. And that it was the problem first before any kind of economics.
Yeah.
And that was attractive to me. It was very attractive. I thought, wow, not only will I learn a lot about all of this, because I've been engaged with secure messaging deployments at some of the largest federal agencies before that. And so security was not a foreign concept. I mean, as far as access control and role-based access, but it was just that very fundamental, foundational thing at the time. And so going to work with them, I decided that I'd be best suited on the business side and sort of developing the programs. And back then they had some recent legislation that had just passed. It was FSMA and the federal government that had been instituted like in 2001. And people were interested in complying, but it was sort of just compliance-based programs that folks were looking at, like, do we really need a security program? You know, what should we be doing here? And so that was how I got my start. I started building these programs. I started writing incident response plans. I started developing relationships with people in the space of really like the CIO space mostly, who were charged with, you know, having responsibility for this stuff, but having no idea exactly how to approach it. Right. And today, you know, for the most part, I work with chief information security officers, I work with early stage companies, and I work with investors. And for those chief information security officers, the thing about them is that they sit in a particularly vulnerable seat, but they also sit in a king-making seat. I mean, they absolutely are the difference between a early stage company flourishing and you know, being a company's first customer, putting them on the map, or ending a company's opportunity if the company doesn't perform well. So they sit in a pivotal seat, but there's also a significant amount of risk.
Yeah.
You know, so I enjoy advising them with the, you know, there's a little over 500 companies out there to choose from. And it's gotten to be too big of a job for CISOs to actually do. And so I work with them to sort of help them separate the wheat from the chaff, the companies that are really good, that are operationally really performing, and help them make buying decisions. And then on the flip side, the early stage companies, I help them go to market to solve real problems versus creating software for software's sake, or creating solutions that are, you know, you see the 27th endpoint protection solution that exists with just slight nuances of difference from all the other existing tools. So that's pretty much where I'm involved.
Yeah, I know. I advised some startups. I was a cybersecurity factory mentor, and yeah, it's always a little bit heartbreaking because everybody is so excited about their idea, and their hearts are in this great place. You know, they want to solve problems, but sometimes you just got to say, hey, that ocean is so red right now. You don't want to swim there, you know, because they're like, but we're so different. It's like, you know, so you must be extremely diplomatic to be able to have those conversations in a way that lets people thrive rather than feel discouraged.
You are so right. It's so true. And I think too, for CISOs, for the most part, when they look at their role, I mean, like these days, it's a really hostile environment for somebody who's going out to sell a bright, shiny new security tool, anything. Yeah. And for their part, a lot of them today will tell you, I don't even see vendors. And they say it with you know, from a point of pride. They say, I don't talk to anybody. I don't see anything new. If you're a large company and you have, you know, 120 tools in your environment already, or a mid-sized one with 50 to 60, or small with, you know, I don't know, 10 to 20.
Yeah.
If the individuals aren't coming forward with something that's actually going to either solve a new problem, help you get rid of some of the investment that you already have, there's no real need to have that conversation. So I help to ease the path for both to speak to each other about new areas of innovation.
So it sounds like you got into cyber because you saw this real need. Suddenly you'd been in the technology space for years and SQL Slammer came along and you're like, oh my gosh, who's really focusing? But why do you stay? What is it every morning when you get up and you think, you know, what's really getting you to bounce out of bed? What is that? What's your cyber why?
Well, I would say my cyber why is the fact that it's just every day is so different. I mean, there's always a threat. You're never 100% an expert in this space. You're never 100% done. You never are. There's always going to be something new. But also, too, I love working with early stage entrepreneurs who are, really the ones that are really earnest and very honest and really trying to solve real problems. And that's pretty rewarding because the odds of being successful in business are small,
Yeah.
yeah, in general. But to solve a problem as big as some of the ones that we see in cybersecurity is kind of a huge accomplishment. And I've seen some companies get there, and I've helped some along. Additionally, with some of the investors, there's a lot of high stakes. I think the high stakes piece of it is really critical. A lot of them have portfolios of companies that are performing in some instances. Probably usually 80 to 90% of the portfolio is not performing. And they'll
Yeah.
bring me in to sort of figure out, well, why is this solution not viable for the marketplace? Or what are we doing? What needs to be different? And that piece of it is probably kind of my superpower. My superpower is getting the trust on both sides and really pulling people, matching people together that really belong together, not just for the sake of, you know, business or opportunity, but really being able to solve the problems of an enterprise.
Yeah, that really is a superpower. That sort of that active listening, because I've heard people say like, "Oh, I would never go into sales because why would you want to be in sales?" And I think about it, I mean, I've never been a sales professional, but when I've seen it working really well, it's not that you're pushing something at somebody that they don't need. You're actively listening to both sides, and you're finding it's like a more of a matchmaker kind of like, let me match you with the right solution, not push something on you.
Absolutely. And I think that our industry overall needs a dose of improved customer experience for the decision makers because people just what they report is just an onslaught of folks that just want to get a meeting and they just want to come in and they just want to talk about whatever. And they know very little about their environment. They know very little about even sometimes the problems that they're solving. I think since I would say since maybe about 2015, our marketplace has seen a lot of convergence of solutions that would be traditionally more AI focused or data focused becoming part of the cybersecurity realm. And with it come the people who sold those solutions. And
Yeah.
so, in a lot of ways, they don't have the legacy understanding of cybersecurity or the understanding of a customer's environment and the layering of all of the acquisitions that they made to date and why they've made them. I think I think that's critical. It's a critical thing to understand in order to talk to any CISO and also to sort of understand like where they sit in the fact that they've got to be right all the time. And if they're wrong once, they're on, the front page of the Washington Post or the New York Times. And that's a very vulnerable place to be. And so having the right tools and the right people working for you are critical for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Okay, so normally we wrap up with a call to action, but I was wondering, given the breadth of the kinds of people that you speak with, I was wondering if you had sort of a how or a call to action, both for the startup, those entrepreneurs who are out there with new ideas, maybe some advice for them, and also some advice for CISOs.
Okay, so I would say for the startup, I would say tell the truth. I would say tell the truth about where you are with your solution. Don't make it a risky proposition for the CISO to the extent that you're putting out an MVP, a minimal viable product.
Yep.
Ask your CISO or the person that you're working with to work hand in hand with you in one form or another, maybe in a pilot form, but be very honest about where you are with your solution, what the roadmap is for it, and take a little time to sort of understand the landscape beyond the myopia of just the one type of product that you might be engaged with. There's over 24 subsectors of tools and solutions in cybersecurity, and a lot of times people go down one path, and that's the thing they know. If they got that hammer, Everything's a nail.
Everything's a nail. Yeah, you need the context and the whole, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And then I would say to the chief information security officers, I think that people feel most comfortable kind of learning and understanding what their peer group is up to. The one thing that's key for me with my network is that I always am very engaged with people who have operational responsibility. So they're actually actively out there on the battlefield fighting with the weapons at hand, and they can tell you in an instant what's good, what's working, what isn't. And that I think that that's sort of some of the best advice. And then you have folks like myself who can understand the other layers, the team, the makeup of the product development portion of the company, the management, the investment that the companies put in into their solution, and whether they're viable for the long term. And I would say also, I have a friend and colleague that I work with for years and years, actually, who really spends a lot of time with this sort of a thing. And he is Richard Steenan, who's was with Gartner years ago, now IT Harvest, and he does a lot of
IDS is dead. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So today he shipped me a book, and you'll be the first person to see this because it's not even released yet. But he shipped me a book.
Yeah.
And it's called the Security Yearbook 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, we're always fighting over how many companies there are out there, who's viable, if they're a real company or not. He actually did the hard research here. And in addition, I was very fortunate to open the book today. And unbeknownst to me, I'm actually a chapter in it, talking about how I got started in cybersecurity. So that was a fun gift today. But what's important about that book, though, is that it sort of goes through this whole evolution piece of how we all how things got started. And I think for the earlier entrepreneurs that are really engaged in more cloud security, or they may be engaged in working with solutions, even in the ICS, OT, and the SCADA space, to sort of understand where things came from will help them tremendously in their discussions of understanding the total world that the CISO lives in and has to operate within.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, great advice there. Tell the truth on the startup side, and for the CISOs, yeah, make sure that you stay connected and in context, and always look at the base of the past of the technology. I mean, yes, things change frequently, but also some things, DNS has been DNS for a while, TCP/IP isn't. So, it's good to also have that good, really, baseline of technical knowledge to create the context.
Absolutely. You hit it on the head. It's important. It's important.
Thank you so much. This has just been an absolute pleasure. Really, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your wisdom with the audience. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We hope to see you next month on My Cyber Why.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.